Human accepted the alien girl's plea for shelter, but her title made him a criminal overnight. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Jake Daniels had never been one for heroic acts. A former military man turned simple mechanic, he preferred his life to be quiet and predictable. After leaving the military, he took up a job in a small, unassuming town on Earth, far from the chaos of intergalactic politics. He spent his days fixing engines, working on small craft, and keeping to himself. But everything changed the night he met Zara. Zara, a tall, elegant woman with silvery blue skin and hair that shimmered like starlight, appeared at his doorstep in the middle of a stormy night. Her eyes, the color of the deep ocean, were filled with desperation. Her plea was simple: she needed shelter. No questions asked. Jake, ever the kind-hearted man, could see that something was wrong, but he had no idea who she really was. She claimed to have been stranded, fleeing from forces she didn't explain. He didn't think much of it at the time, thinking she was just another traveler in need of help. He invited her in without hesitation, offering her warmth, food, and a place to stay for the night. Zara seemed grateful, though there was an air of mystery about her that Jake couldn't shake. As the storm raged outside, they shared a quiet evening, with Zara occasionally glancing at him, her eyes reflecting something beyond the immediate crisis. Jake didn't know it then, but his simple act of kindness would soon thrust him into a world far beyond his comprehension. Little did he know, Zara was no ordinary traveler. She wasn't just a stranded alien woman, she was a royal, a princess of the highly powerful Xylar Empire. And her arrival on Earth was anything but accidental. Her enemies, those from her own world, had been searching for her. But now, with the protection of a human like Jake, her life and his was about to take a dangerous turn. When the morning came, so did the consequences. Jake's phone buzzed with an urgent message. The authorities were looking for Zara. His name had already been linked to her, he was considered an accomplice in a matter far beyond anything he could have imagined. In an instant, everything had changed. His simple act of charity had turned him into a criminal, marked for capture by alien forces who saw his actions as treasonous. His quiet life was gone, and now he had to decide: protect Zara, the mysterious alien princess, or save himself. With enemies closing in, Jake's life would never be the same. He had become a target, but he wasn't going to back down. Not now, not when he had made a promise to protect her. The next few days were a blur for Jake Daniels. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his simple, quiet existence, was now a thing of the past. Every glance he cast around his apartment, every creak of the floorboards beneath his feet, felt like an echo of the life he once had. He had a new reality to face now, and it was anything but ordinary. He didn't know what to think about Zara, the alien woman who had turned his world upside down. She wasn't just an innocent bystander caught in a storm, as she had claimed. No, she was a princess, a royal from the Xylar Empire, and the consequences of sheltering her were about to change everything. Jake had already received multiple warnings. Strange figures in dark suits had shown up at his door, flashing badges he didn't recognize. They had come inquiring about Zara, about her whereabouts. Jake had stayed silent, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea who they were or what they wanted, but one thing was certain: he was now involved in something far bigger than he ever could have imagined. Zara had disappeared after that night, gone into hiding in a place Jake didn't know. But his life had already been altered. He could feel the pressure mounting with each passing hour. The weight of his actions was settling in, and it was suffocating. He had been a simple mechanic, someone who fixed engines and led an uncomplicated life. But now, he was wanted by forces that seemed to span across the stars. His phone buzzed on the counter as Jake stood in his kitchen, the silence of his apartment only broken by the soft hum of the refrigerator. The message was from an unknown number. His hand trembled as he picked it up. You need to come to us, Jake Daniels. There is no escaping this. The words were clear, a threat hidden beneath layers of politeness. He stared at the screen, his mind racing. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know who was after him, but they had eyes everywhere. It didn't matter that he had done nothing wrong, that he had only helped someone in need. To them, he was now a criminal. There was a knock on the door. Jake froze, the phone slipping from his hands. He hadn't expected anyone. The knock came again, louder this time. Whoever it was, they weren't going away. With a sigh, Jake wiped his sweaty palms on his pants before heading to the door. His heart pounded as he opened it slowly. To his surprise, it wasn't a law enforcement officer or some faceless figure in a suit. It was Zara. Her eyes were wide with fear, her usual regal composure shattered. She looked over her shoulder as if expecting someone to follow her. "Jake," she whispered urgently, "they're coming for us. You need to leave, now." Jake didn't hesitate. He didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear, he was no longer a mechanic living a simple life. He was caught in a game far beyond him, and if he didn't act fast, everything he knew would be lost. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. Zara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room nervously. "I have a place. But we have to move quickly." Jake nodded. He wasn't sure what was coming next, but for the first time in days, he felt the adrenaline kicking in. He wasn't just helping someone anymore. He was part of something far bigger. And there was no turning back. As Jake followed Zara through the darkened streets, his mind raced. He had no idea where they were going, but the urgency in Zara's voice had been enough to push him forward without question. The city around him seemed almost too quiet, like a thick veil had fallen over everything, muting the usual sounds of cars, people, and the distant hum of technology. They moved quickly, Zara's steps swift and calculated, her eyes scanning the surroundings constantly. Jake's heart beat faster with each step, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He didn't know who was after them or how they had found him, but he knew they couldn't afford to stop. Zara led him through narrow alleys, avoiding the main roads. She was clearly familiar with the layout of the city, her movements precise, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Jake couldn't help but glance over at her. Despite her regal appearance, there was something vulnerable in her eyes, something that hadn't been there when they first met. Her usual confidence had given way to something more fragile, more human. He wanted to ask her what had happened, what kind of trouble they were in, but he knew it wasn't the time. Not yet. As they rounded a corner, Zara stopped abruptly, holding a hand up to signal him to stay silent. Jake froze, his eyes darting to the shadows ahead. The air felt thick, heavy, like a storm was about to break. He could hear the distant sound of footsteps, more than one pair, and they were getting closer. Zara's grip tightened around his wrist, pulling him toward a small, nondescript door built into the side of a brick building. The door was barely noticeable, blending into the wall as if it had been there for centuries. She pushed it open quickly, revealing a dark staircase leading downward. Without a word, Zara descended first, Jake close behind. The door creaked shut behind them with a soft click, and they were swallowed by darkness. The smell of damp stone filled Jake's nose as they moved deeper into the underground passage. It was quiet down here, too quiet. The only sound was their footsteps echoing against the walls, and the occasional creak of the old wood beneath their feet. Jake glanced around, his eyes straining to adjust to the darkness. It didn't feel like an ordinary underground bunker, this place felt ancient, as if it had been hidden for centuries. After what seemed like an eternity, Zara stopped in front of a stone wall. She pressed her palm against a section of it, and with a soft rumble, the wall shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. She stepped inside without hesitation, and Jake followed. The room inside was small but well-equipped, with old furniture and a few glowing panels on the walls, casting a faint blue light. It was clear that this place had been prepared for emergencies, for hiding. Zara moved toward a control panel on the far wall and activated it. A faint hum filled the air as the room came to life, the panels lighting up with data. She turned to face Jake, her expression serious. "This is where we'll stay for now," she said, her voice steady but tired. "It's safe here, but we can't stay for long. They'll be looking for us." Jake nodded, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened in the last few days. He had gone from a simple mechanic to a fugitive, caught up in an intergalactic mess that was far beyond his understanding. But despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, there was one thing he knew for sure: he couldn't walk away now. Not when Zara needed him. "What's going on, Zara?" he asked finally, his voice soft but firm. "Who's after us? Why?" Zara took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the data on the control panel before she looked back at him. "They are the Xylar Empire's enforcers," she said, her voice low. "They are hunting me. And now that you've helped me, they will hunt you too. But it's not just about me. There's something far bigger at play here, something that could change everything." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Xylar Empire, he had heard of them. A powerful, ancient empire that controlled vast regions of space. But why would they be after Zara? And why would they target him? He didn't know, but he was about to find out. "What do we do now?" Jake asked, looking at her with a mixture of fear and determination. Zara met his gaze, her expression softening for the first time. "We survive. And we fight back." The days that followed were a blur of tension and uncertainty for Jake. His life had been completely uprooted. The quiet mechanic who had once spent his days working on engines and living a simple life now found himself in hiding, surrounded by a world he had never imagined. Zara, the alien princess, had shared little about her past, but her cryptic words about the Xylar Empire echoed in his mind. They were not just after her, they were after him as well. Each day felt like a ticking clock, a countdown to something inevitable. As he sat in the dimly lit room Zara had led him to, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was living in a nightmare he couldn't escape. Zara was working tirelessly at the control panel, her sharp eyes flicking over data, her fingers moving across the holographic interface with practiced precision. Jake, though trying to focus on what little he could understand, found his mind drifting. He had so many questions, but Zara had been tight-lipped about everything except the basics. He respected her silence, knowing that some things were too dangerous to share. Still, he needed to know more, he had to. "What's really going on, Zara?" Jake asked, his voice breaking the quiet hum of the room. "Why are they after you? What is it that's so important?" Zara didn't immediately respond. She stood there, her eyes tracing the data that flickered before her, but Jake could tell her mind was far away, lost in thoughts of her own. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "It's not just me they want. It's the future of my people, Jake. I carry something that could shift the balance of power in the universe. A secret that the Xylar Empire would kill to possess." Jake's confusion only deepened. A secret? What could one alien princess possibly have that was so important? "What is it?" he pressed, his curiosity pushing him forward despite the uncertainty. Zara turned to him then, her violet eyes meeting his. There was a weight in them, a mix of sorrow and determination. "I am the last of my line. The royal family, the true rulers of the Xylar Empire, have been wiped out. I carry the genetic code needed to restore the empire, to bring back the power it once held." Jake blinked, stunned. "Wait, you're telling me you're the heir to the Xylar throne? The one they've been searching for all this time?" Zara nodded, her expression unreadable. "Yes, but it's not just about the throne. It's about power. The power to control everything. The Xylar Empire was once a beacon of civilization, but now it's a fractured shell, fighting amongst itself for dominance. I hold the key to its survival or its destruction." Jake's mind spun with this new information. He had gone from fixing engines to being tangled in a galactic struggle for power. He didn't know how he had ended up in this situation, but there was no turning back now. He was in deeper than he had ever imagined. "So, they'll stop at nothing to get to you," Jake murmured, more to himself than to Zara. "They'll do whatever it takes." Zara's face softened for a brief moment, a flicker of emotion crossing her features. Yes. They will. The room fell silent again, the weight of their conversation settling heavily between them. Jake could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on him. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was part of this, whether he liked it or not. He had already made the decision to protect Zara, but he didn't fully understand the risks he was taking. He didn't understand what he was up against. But what he did know was that he couldn't let her down. She needed him. And for the first time in days, Jake felt something other than fear. It was determination, a burning need to do whatever it took to keep Zara safe. He wouldn't back down, not now, not when everything was on the line. "We'll get through this," Jake said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. "We'll find a way to stop them." Zara looked at him then, her expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something, hope, perhaps, hidden behind her guarded eyes. "I hope you're right, Jake." The following morning, the hum of the control panels was the only sound in the hidden underground room. Zara was already at the terminal, her fingers dancing over the holographic display as she monitored the approaching signals. Jake stood nearby, his mind still reeling from the weight of their situation. Despite the overwhelming odds, one thing was clear: he was in this now, for better or worse. The room was dim, lit only by the soft blue glow of the screens, but the tension was palpable. Jake's gaze drifted over to Zara. She seemed different today, more focused, more determined. There was a strength in her that hadn't been there when they first met. He had no idea what had happened to her back on Xylar, but he could sense that her burdens were much greater than what she was letting on. He had known her only as the alien princess in need of help, but now he was beginning to understand that she was more than just that. Zara was a survivor. And she wasn't going to let anyone or anything take away what little freedom she had left. As he moved closer, Jake could see the way her eyes flicked back and forth across the data, her expression unreadable. She was calm on the surface, but there was an underlying current of tension that only he could sense. "What are we looking at?" Jake asked, his voice breaking the silence. Zara didn't turn to face him immediately. She was lost in the data, her focus unwavering. "We have less than 24 hours, she said, her voice low but firm. "The Xylar enforcers will be here soon. They've already tracked us to this location. We need to move, and we need to move fast." Jake's heart sank. He had hoped for more time, but he knew better than to think they had any more than that. "Where are we going?" he asked, his mind racing. Zara finally turned to him, her eyes meeting his. For the first time in days, she seemed vulnerable. But there was still a fire in those eyes. "I have a safe house. It's far from here, hidden in the outskirts of the city. It's the only place where we can lay low long enough to figure out our next move." Jake nodded, his thoughts racing. The idea of moving again, of being on the run, didn't sit well with him. But it wasn't like they had any other options. "Let's go," Jake said, his voice steady. "We'll figure it out along the way." Zara gave a small nod, and they began to gather their things. As they prepared to leave, Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. They had no idea what they were about to face, but one thing was certain: they couldn't afford to fail. The world outside was unpredictable, and they had to stay ahead of the people who were hunting them. The city was alive with activity when they stepped outside. The streets were bustling with people, most of them oblivious to the danger lurking just around the corner. Jake and Zara moved quickly, staying in the shadows, blending in with the crowd as best as they could. The weight of their situation hung heavy in the air. Every footstep, every turn, felt like it was drawing them closer to something they couldn't escape. As they neared the outskirts of the city, Jake's thoughts began to shift. He was no longer just a mechanic caught up in a galactic struggle. He was a man on the run, caught between two worlds, and the only thing he knew for certain was that he would do whatever it took to keep Zara safe. For the first time in a long time, he felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins. They had no idea what awaited them, but they were going to face it together. When they finally reached the safe house, a feeling of cautious relief washed over them. They had made it, but they knew it was only a temporary victory. The real fight was just beginning. The safe house was quiet, its walls thick and unyielding against the chaos outside. Jake and Zara stood in the small, dimly lit room, the only sound the faint hum of the air system. The room was sparsely furnished, with only the essentials: a bed, a small table, and a few chairs. It felt like a temporary refuge, a place where they could rest for a brief moment before the storm inevitably came. Jake paced the room, his mind racing. The weight of their situation was starting to settle in. He wasn't just hiding from the authorities, he was running from an empire, a galactic power that would stop at nothing to get what it wanted. Zara had been quiet since they arrived, her usual confidence replaced by a pensive silence. He could see it in her eyes. She was calculating, strategizing, preparing for the next move. But what that move would be, he didn't know. "How long can we stay here?" Jake asked, his voice breaking the silence. Zara's gaze lifted to meet his, her expression guarded but resolute. "Not long," she replied, her voice low. "They'll find us eventually. We're too exposed here." Jake stopped pacing and turned to face her. He could see the strain in her eyes, the burden of leadership that she carried. It was a weight he couldn't even begin to comprehend. "What's the plan then?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. Zara stood up and walked toward the table, her steps measured and deliberate. "We need to get off Earth," she said, her tone firm. "I have contacts, people who can help us. But it won't be easy. We need to move fast and stay under the radar." Jake nodded, the reality of what she was saying sinking in. He had never imagined his life would lead him to this point, running across planets, trying to escape a war he had no part in. But as he looked at Zara, he realized that he wasn't just trying to save himself, he was trying to save her too. "I'll do whatever it takes," Jake said, his voice resolute. Zara's eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of gratitude passing through them. "I know," she replied. "But this is bigger than just you and me. The Xylar Empire won't stop until they have what they want. And they want me. They'll burn everything to get to me." Jake's jaw clenched at the thought. He didn't fully understand the politics of the galaxy or the significance of Zara's lineage, but he understood one thing: she was worth protecting. They both were. "So what now?" Jake asked. "We leave as soon as possible," Zara replied. "But we need supplies, weapons, and a way to get off-world without being detected. It's going to take time, and we'll need to be careful." Jake looked out the window, the city skyline barely visible through the thick fog. His mind was already working, thinking about what they would need to escape, how they could stay one step ahead. But for the first time in a while, he felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just running anymore. He was part of something much bigger, and he wasn't going to back down. He turned back to Zara. "We'll make it," he said with a confidence he hadn't felt before. Zara met his gaze, her expression unreadable, but for a brief moment, he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "We will," she said, almost to herself. But Jake could hear the doubt beneath her words, the uncertainty of their future. He knew the road ahead would be dangerous. They had no guarantees, no promises of survival. But one thing was certain: they were in this together. And together, they might just have a chance. The future of the Xylar Empire, and perhaps the galaxy itself, was at stake. But Jake wasn't going to let that weight crush him. He would fight for Zara. He would fight for them both. The plan was set in motion the following morning. Jake and Zara had no time to waste. Their time at the safe house had been a brief respite, but the looming threat of the Xylar Empire's enforcers still hung over them. They had to move quickly, and the first step was to gather supplies. Zara had already prepared a list of everything they would need: money, weapons, food, and most importantly, a way to leave Earth undetected. The task ahead seemed impossible, but Jake wasn't about to back down. He had already come too far, and his commitment to Zara had solidified. As they made their way through the city, Zara led the way, her movements precise and confident. She knew exactly where they were going, and Jake followed closely behind, keeping his eyes peeled for any sign of danger. The streets were crowded as usual, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every step they took felt like a step closer to being exposed. As they neared a small marketplace, Zara stopped abruptly. "This way," she said, her voice low but firm. Jake followed her into a narrow alleyway, where a small, inconspicuous door stood at the end. Zara knocked 3 times, a rhythmic pattern Jake didn't understand. After a brief moment, the door creaked open, revealing a tall man with a grizzled face. He was human, but there was something about him that didn't sit right. "Zara," the man greeted her, his voice a rough whisper. "We've been expecting you." Jake looked between them, sensing the tension in the air. "You must be Jake," the man said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I wasn't expecting a human to be involved in this." Zara stepped forward, her eyes flashing with authority. "Jake is with me," she said firmly. "He's helping. That's all you need to know." The man nodded, though Jake could see the hesitation in his gaze. He wasn't exactly thrilled to have an outsider involved, but there was no turning back now. The man stepped aside, allowing them both to enter. The room inside was small and cluttered, with various tools and devices scattered across the table. It was clear that this was a safe house for people who needed to disappear quickly and quietly. "We have everything you need," the man said, turning to a large metal case in the corner. He opened it, revealing stacks of credits, weapons, and a few pieces of technology Jake didn't recognize. "The ship leaves tonight," the man continued. "You'll have to move fast. There's no time to waste." Zara nodded. "Thank you," she said, her tone softening for a moment. Jake, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was a hidden tension here, an undercurrent of danger that hadn't been present before. The man handed Zara a small device. "This will help you get through the checkpoints," he said. "But don't trust anyone. If things go wrong, we won't be able to help you." Jake felt a chill run down his spine at the man's words. The stakes had just gotten higher, and there was no going back. As they left the safe house, Jake looked at Zara. She seemed calm, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "What's next?" Jake asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. Zara didn't answer immediately. She looked out at the street, her mind clearly racing as she processed the next step in their escape. "We get to the ship. We get off Earth. After that, we'll figure it out." Jake wasn't convinced, but he knew there was no point in questioning her. For now, all he could do was follow her lead. The journey ahead was going to be long and dangerous, but it was a journey they had no choice but to take. As they walked through the crowded streets once again, Jake couldn't help but feel the weight of the universe pressing down on them. They were running out of time, and soon, the real fight would begin. The night was closing in, and Jake could feel the pressure mounting with every step they took. The city had taken on a new, foreboding quality, the streets darker, the sounds more distant. It was as if the world around him knew something he didn't, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Zara walked ahead, her pace brisk, but Jake could see the subtle signs of tension in her posture. Her usual confidence was there, but it was tempered with something else, worry, maybe, or a deep-rooted fear. Jake wasn't sure what they were walking into, but he knew it was going to be dangerous. They reached the docking bay as the city lights flickered in the distance, their shadows long and ominous. The ship they were looking for, a sleek, unmarked vessel, sat quietly at the far end of the dock, its engines idle, its hull reflecting the dim glow of the station's lights. It looked like a ghost ship, simple, utilitarian, but with an air of mystery about it. Zara's expression softened as she approached the ship. Jake could tell that this was their ticket out of here, but the sense of finality in her movements was unmistakable. "This is it," Zara said quietly, turning to Jake. "Once we're on that ship, there's no going back. We'll be off-world, and we'll be one step closer to escaping the Xylar Empire's reach." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He knew this wasn't just a journey across space, it was a journey into the unknown, one that would change everything. He couldn't afford to hesitate now. "Let's go," Jake said, his voice steady. He followed Zara up the ramp, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the quiet as they entered the ship. Inside was as sparse as the outside, with functional seating and a small control area. The crew was nowhere to be seen, but the presence of the ship's systems suggested that it was ready to depart at a moment's notice. Zara moved to the control panel and began to input a series of commands. Jake stood at the entrance, watching her, feeling a sense of urgency rising within him. The ship had to leave soon. They had to get away before the enforcers found them. "We're good to go," Zara said after a moment, her voice calm despite the tension in the air. "We've got a few hours before we hit hyperspace. We'll be off the radar by then." Jake took a deep breath and moved toward her, settling into the seat next to hers. He didn't ask where they were going, it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered now was leaving Earth and surviving whatever came next. As the ship's engines roared to life, Jake felt a jolt in his chest. This was it. They were leaving everything behind. The life he knew, the city, the quiet routine of his days, all of it was now a distant memory. Ahead of them was the vast unknown, and for the first time in a long time, Jake felt a strange sense of excitement. He didn't know what awaited them on the other side of the stars, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let Zara face it alone. The ship soared into the sky, leaving Earth behind. They passed through the atmosphere, the blue of the planet fading into the blackness of space. Jake looked out the window for a moment, watching the stars stretch out before them. The journey ahead would be long, and it would be fraught with dangers. But for the first time in days, Jake felt a sense of peace settle over him. They were moving forward, and they were moving together. The universe was vast, but as long as they had each other, Jake believed they could face whatever it threw at them. The ship drifted further into the unknown, the hum of its engines a constant reminder that they were no longer tied to Earth. Jake sat in the small control room, his eyes fixed on the vast expanse of stars outside the window. The silence of space was almost comforting, a welcome change from the frantic pace of the city and the fear of being hunted. Zara sat beside him, her eyes scanning the data on the control panel in front of her. She had remained mostly quiet since they left Earth, but Jake could sense the weight of her thoughts. There was so much she wasn't saying, and he didn't know how to reach her. The vastness of space felt endless, like a promise of freedom and danger all at once. They were far from the reach of the Xylar Empire, but Jake knew it was only a matter of time before they came after them. He could feel the tension in his chest, the pressure building with every passing minute. "How long until we're out of their reach?" Jake finally asked, breaking the silence. Zara didn't look at him immediately, but her fingers stopped moving over the controls. "It depends," she said quietly. "We'll be in hyperspace soon, and once we're there, we'll be hidden from the Empire's trackers. But that's just the first step. We need to reach the safe haven before they realize we're gone." Jake nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They were still not safe, not by a long shot. There was no guarantee they would make it to their destination without being discovered. But at least they had a chance now, a chance to escape the Empire's grasp. He looked at Zara, her profile illuminated by the soft glow of the control panel. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" he asked, his voice low. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "More than you can imagine," she replied, her tone distant. Jake wanted to ask her more, to understand her past, to help her carry the burden she was clearly carrying. But he knew better than to push her. She had shared what she could, and the rest was up to her. For now, all he could do was support her and hope they made it through this alive. "We'll get there," Jake said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We'll make it to the safe haven. We just need to stick together." Zara didn't respond right away, but her eyes softened slightly. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment, Jake thought he saw a flicker of something, trust, maybe, or gratitude. It was fleeting, but it was enough. For the first time since they had met, Zara seemed to let her guard down, even if only a little. They sat in silence, the stars outside their window offering no answers, only endless possibilities. Jake didn't know what the future held, but as long as they had each other, he was ready to face whatever came next. The journey was far from over, but it was a journey they would take together. As the ship entered hyperspace, the stars stretched out before them, a sea of endless possibilities. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Jake felt a sense of hope, however small. They had made it this far, and maybe, just maybe, they could make it all the way.